So we've spoken a bit about the psychic process and what you see. What's the difference between psychics, intuitives, mediums?
That's a good question. There are differences. For example, a difference between a psychic and a medium would be that if a client is looking more for confirmation and information in dialect that has to do with someone that's beyond the grave, and they want specifics to that relative, family member, or friend, then it's better to see a medium than a psychic. Because although a psychic might be able to sense the spirit or might be able to even get some things from the spirit, the psychic is more tuned into the guide, the celestial being, not so much the spirit. So I would find that it would be challenging and difficult for a psychic to straight just do telepathy with a ghost or a spirit. So a medium works more with information, not with cards necessarily. They don't even necessarily use cards. And they have a very gift of clear audio. An intuitive and a psychic is a little different in regards to a psychic generally is kind of born into that situation. In other words, there's people like lawyers that come from families that are diverse in law, or the medical society might have generations of doctors. Well, psychics usually have the same. And usually in a psychic's family, you will find that the bloodline goes back generations, and it might be common talk to sit around the dinner table and talk about telekinesis or mind control or any various metaphysical topics. So the difference between a psychic and an intuitive isn't necessarily born into a psychic family or condition, but yet they have an intuitive mindset where they develop it to the point where their psychic ability is enhanced. The difference between the psychic and the intuitive is the intuitive probably has a very strong skill set to tone things down easier than the psychic, because the psychic is coming from an angle that usually has genetic disposition and family ties. So that goes back to another thing when you're picking out a psychic. One of the things you want to look for is possibly some of the family connections that are with that person, because a true psychic is probably going to have their grandmother or their great-grandmother or their uncle or someone in the family that helps them to develop the gift.
So, in other words, I have a friend whose grandmother's psychic, or was psychic, whose mother's psychic, and there is a bloodline of psychics that date back to the Civil War. And some are herbalists, and some are healers, and some, I assume, are intuitives or mediums or whatever.
Yes, yeah.
So if you want to go talk with your relative who's on the other side, then you want to look for a medium.
Yes.
If you want a handle on some events that are going on with you, like, why is my dog barking all the time? If you want to get a handle on events or situations, and yes, I do. There are different types of mediums. I happen to know or met and worked with briefly an animal communicator. And so she psychically talks to animals. So I'm assuming that would be a good thing to find out why Virgil likes to be very communicative during our interviews. But so I assume there just must be all different types of psychics, like there are different types of cooks. There's a French chef and the Italian chef and the chef who's great with vegetarian meals and someone who's good with beef Wellington. And in the same, it's in the psychic world, you have people that are good communicating with animals or people that are good communicating with spirit, i.e. those who've passed on. And then people who are good at divination or telling current events or future events.
Yeah.
Do you find that in your family, were there people or are there people who have psychic abilities, but everybody does something a little different? So one member in your family is the French chef, and one member's the Italian chef, and you like to cook, some other type of food. Do you find that within your family, or does everyone sort of have the same type of gift?
That's a good question. I think it does vary, and might give some credence back to the intuitive thing too. But it does vary, but there is a nucleus. So you're right. One psychic, for example, you could have two relatives or two not relatives, two psychics. One psychic could go into a haunted dwelling, okay? And there might be a lot of ghost activity. And that psychic goes in, and they have a natural disposition of energy that pushes the ghosts away. So some psychics just naturally will walk in and diffuse the situation, right? So you don't want to bring him or her, if you're doing ghost investigations, where another psychic has the complete opposite. They go in and it's like a lighthouse. The ghosts just, So there's different, I guess it's different modalities of energy. Are you a psychic that pushes? Are you a psychic that pulls? Therefore, back to the intuitive, it doesn't necessarily just mean a bloodline. If you have an intuitive ability as opposed to a psychic ability, and they're both similar, but the intuitive doesn't necessarily use the cards. The intuitive uses more of the sixth sense in regards to sensing. And usually the intuitive, hand in hand goes with, you'll see the word medical with it. Because a lot of the intuitives are, and we'll find this in the future that some of the hospitals will start to embrace this. But some of these intuitives will be able to go to a patient that might have a cancer or might be going in for a surgery, and that psychic, they'll call it a medical intuitive, right, will be able to either help prep energetically the patient so that the surgery actually goes that much more successful. So it would be nice to have the Western doctors and the holistic doctors and the metaphysical doctors all kind of incorporate science together, and then we would have healing truly take place.
So, having worked in the holistic field for a number of years myself, I know that to be true. And I know that there's a definite mind-body connection. In my field, for instance, one method I was taught was Reiki, and using Reiki on someone before an operation or before an intended event or whatever to have the most auspicious or positive outcomes. So I would assume, because you're working with energy, it's the same type of situation, spirit being energy, and you're working to the betterment of that spirit as it undergoes some tweaking in a Western medical sense, I guess. That's really interesting. Have you had any direct experience as far as that goes yourself from working with people who are worried about different health situations, and were you able to give them some advice that helped them to be more, I don't want to say self-sufficient, but allowed them to also take part in the healing process or become part of that widget or cog in the wheel of the healing process?
Yeah. There's been a few cases that I've been involved with, some indirectly, indirectly meaning there might have been distance, and energy can travel time and space. So therefore you can heal someone that's in another state or area. But I have had, there's a couple of experiences that stick out to mind. And I can remember one, there was a gentleman who ended up in a hospital setting, and they were basically on their deathbed, and I was close to them, and it was kind of strange how they ended up there. It was metaphysical in nature, and so when I get called to go to the hospital, by the time I got there, I saw the lawyer, I saw the religious person, and the family. But I also saw, over and above the grave, a woman, which was his mother, who had passed, and a brother, who were both dead. And they were on either side of him. And he was unconscious, he couldn't breathe, he couldn't, And I instantly knew at that time that they were both interfering with his free will because he was still alive. Mm-hmm. And the mother was saying go, and the brother was saying stay. And he still, in his consciousness, mm-hmm. was trying to make a choice of whether he was going to partake in passing or staying. Mm-hmm. I had received an amethyst quartz crystal from Italy a few months prior to that, which was very special to me. I was aware that it was a healing energetic stone, but I didn't have a manual or anything like that. But something intuitively, psychically told me to bring it to the hospital. I placed it on his stomach, and I immediately, through telepathy, advised his mother, who was on the other side, to leave, and his brother to do the same, because he needs to make up his own mind. And do you know, within 24 hours after that, he came back, and he had revealed to me that he had a metaphysical situation and saw something from beyond the grave that actually was part of why he ended up in the hospital. And this was an individual that, not very diverse in metaphysics or religion. So there has been experiences like that where people have been able to receive healings through modalities such as quartz crystals, prayer, psychic energy, and of the such.
I remember using, when I was in massage therapy school, learning the use of crystals for healing, and luckily I had a very eclectic teacher, so we got into energy work, which then led me to sound healing. Mm. This has been a really interesting discussion tonight. Thank you for your time, and I really look forward to our next chapter of Coffee Cards and the Cosmos.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jason.